Alright, so in getting started, remember that we're going to be using our 1/4 inch scale plan underneath our drawing for today. So first thing that you need to do is get that tape down. Make sure that you're squaring it up with your table, and if you don't square it up with your table, make sure that everything that you draw later is going to be perpendicular or parallel or squared up with your drawing. I just want to make sure that I have enough room up above here so that I can draw out that elevation and then the perspective view. Alright, next I need to put my trace paper down. And I just have a 12-inch roll, which will be fine for this. And your trace paper doesn't necessarily need to be squared up with the table because your drawing will be squared up with this, but it's always nice to have things line up, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that anyways. So I'm just going to be going off of the PowerPoint that I sent to you guys on 1-point perspectives. So if you want to follow along on that, otherwise I'll be calling out what we're actually doing so you guys can follow along this video as is. Alright, so step 1, determine what you would like to see from the floor plan in the perspective drawing. And as we mentioned in class, we really want to take a look at the wall with the fireplace on it in the living room. So step 2 says draw a horizontal line representing the picture plane, and it must be parallel to the viewer. So if we're going to be standing back here, we want to make sure that that line is nice and parallel to us. So the picture plane line, we're going to draw on the interior of that wall, but we want to go to the furthest point back on that wall. So if I was standing here, the furthest point back that I could see would actually line up with this back wall. So just take a straight edge, you can use your triangle or your scale. Make sure it's lined up with that back wall. I'm just going to extend that line all the way to the end of the paper. And I'll label that picture plane. Again, you don't have to label it, but it helps me keep track of what I'm actually looking at and referring to. Alright, step 3, establish your station point, or the place where you want to stand and look at the space. So we kind of figured out in class that if we take that 60-degree cone of vision, so this is 60 degrees, and if I just lay it on here, I can kind of see how much I would be actually viewing of the room. So if I placed my camera or my picture point, or excuse me, my station point right here, I would only be looking at the fireplace and I wouldn't really get the furniture or the windows in there. And we want to see more of this space, so I'm going to go ahead and move it back. And so if I would place my person kind of in that kitchen area, we would still be seeing a little bit of the windows and the furniture, but I'm going to even move it further back and place it about where that sink is on the plan. Now if I was actually to stand here and look, obviously there's a wall in the way and I'd be looking at the bathroom wall. For a 1-point perspective, you can kind of delete things that you aren't going to be seeing. So if we only want to see the living room in my perspective when I'm drawing, I'm not going to pay attention to anything that's not in the living room. So I won't be drafting the cabinets or this wall. I'll just be looking at what's in my cone of vision in the living room. So to develop that cone of vision, I'm going to just take a straight line that lines up with this picture plane and also intersects my station point. And this is just for reference. Alright, so I have my station point down here. And in order to get that cone of vision that's perpendicular with the picture plane, and it's a 60-degree angle, I'm going to take the 30-degree and double it. So do a 30-degree angle on both sides, so total it'll be 60 degrees. So what I'll be doing is lining it up with this kind of imaginary line that we just created and my station point. And then drawing a line from my station point all the way to the picture plane.
You can extend it, but that's not necessary.
Alright, so that is our cone of view, and it's about 60 degrees. So step 4, it says, with a scale, draw a rectangle in the center of your page, the same width and height of the picture plane. The height of the picture plane equals the height of the room. The bottom line is known as the ground line. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just get my reference points from the walls. And since it's already to scale, which yours is at 1/4 of an inch, it should be the correct width of the wall. So I'm just lining it up with the interior of the wall and drawing a reference point going up, because this is where we're going to locate that 1-point perspective. Alright, now I also need to create the ground line. So that's going to be basically the bottom of the wall that you're looking at. And I want to line it up to be perpendicular to these, so I know that it's at a 90-degree angle. So that is my ground line. I also need to make the top of that box. And so it says that the height of the picture plane for that box that we're looking at, the wall, is equal to the height of the room. So if you take your elevation that you worked on last time and just measure from that ground level or the ground line all the way to the peak of that wall, I think we figured that it was 15 feet 6 inches. So to scale, we're going to go up 15 feet 6 inches from that ground line. And if you remember how we determined that, is based on our plan view. So I'm not sure if you can see it in this video or not, but if you look at your plan, there should be a dashed line that kind of lines up with the fireplace as well as this interior wall that goes to the bathroom, and it runs all along the plan of that cabin. So that dashed line indicates a change in ceiling plan, or in just a change in the ceiling. So what I'm going to do is just line it up with that dashed line, and then make sure that I have 15 feet 6 inches up from that.
So I have it marked at that 15 feet tick mark, then I'll go up past 0 to that 6 inches reference.
And just put a dot there for now. I also want to figure out how tall these interior walls are. So if I look at here, I want to figure out how the height of these and also the height of that. So we just did that dot, and now I'm going to do these next. And we figured that it was 12 feet. So again, I'll go from that ground line at 12 feet and just put a small dot. Do the same thing on the other side. Now, since I have those reference points, I'm just going to draw the connecting lines to form that ceiling plane. As you can see right here, that's like the elevation that we created last time of that wall. Step 5 says to add a horizontal line 5 feet above the ground line of the picture plane. This is known as the horizon line, or the height of the average viewer. So again, from that ground line, we're going to use our scale to measure up 5 feet. And since we do use that horizon line for other reference points, I'm just going to put it all the way across and extend it beyond the walls. Step 6, mark the vanishing point on the horizon line. This is the location of the viewer looking into the scene. This should be along the same line as the station point on the plan, and you can draw a vertical guideline from the station point on the plan to locate the vanishing point on the picture plane. So basically just where this line intersects this line, and I'll label this our horizon line. So starting at our station point and finding where it intersects that horizon line, I'm just going to put a small dot right there. So that's our vanishing point. Step 7, using your triangle, lightly draw lines from the vanishing point through the 4 corners of the picture. So lining it up with that vanishing point. And also lining it up with the corner of the room. Just drawing a line out. And you repeat that on all the corners. I'm also going to take out the plan from underneath. Since we've already established all of our guidelines, we don't really need this underneath anymore. And just for clarity, I'm going to take it out. You can do this as well, but if you want to leave it under, there's no harm in that. So step 11 says to locate the width and the depth of the fireplace and built-in shelving on the floor plane. So I've already gone ahead and done that. So on your floor plane, what it's asking you to do is find how deep this is, or the depth of the fireplace and shelving. And then I also marked out how wide each of these are, just so that we can go ahead and get that started. All right, so we're going to take the depth of the fireplace and shelving, which was 2 feet, and we're going to place that on the ground level, or that ground line, starting from this corner and going over. So it says measure from the left corner over to the left side of the fireplace, so going this way. Make sure that you are using the right scale. So I'm going to take that 2 feet that we just found for the depth and measure from this corner inward. So mark that 2 feet right there. Next it says to draw a line from the vanishing point to the depth measurement. So from here to that depth measurement. Alright, and I'm just going to draw a light line. And then the next step says draw a line from the diagonal point to that measurement. And if you look on your PowerPoint, it says to go from this diagonal point and kind of go through that corner once again. So diagonal point to the corner of the room, and then draw it until they intersect. So I realize it's a little bit hard to understand why we're drawing all of these lines that intersect, but just to give you kind of a visual on what we would actually be doing if we were looking at the plan. So we already have kind of this ground line that's been established. So that would be our ground line, right? We measured over 2 feet from this corner right here. So 2 feet from that corner. And basically what that diagonal line is creating a 45-degree angle. So if I were to draw a 45-degree angle coming this way, this is kind of like our diagonal point referencing that corner. So the line that comes out this way is actually in reality parallel to that wall line. But since we're looking at it in a 3D perspective view, all of these are going to start to look a little bit skewed. But if you were to actually draw it out or lay it out on the floor, they would be parallel. So if we take that line straight out, similar to what this one is doing right here that we measured from that vanishing point, you see that these two intersect. So this one would be like our DP line, and this one would be our vanishing point line. And if you guys remember back to geometry, a 45-degree angle, if you put two of those together, it creates a 90-degree angle. So we know that if we measure this one to be 2 feet, and we have that angle going through it, we know that the distance from here to this corner is also 2 feet. And if you can see, this intersection should line up exactly with that front of the fireplace and shelving. So if we go back to our perspective, that intersection is the same one that comes right here. So what we want to do is to mark a line going all the way across that horizon. And we'll know that everything along that line is exactly 2 feet from this back wall. Just like if I would take the plan and draw a line straight across. Sorry, I didn't tape it down, so it's a little bit messy. But if I would draw a line straight across, that line is exactly 2 feet from the wall. So that's essentially what we're doing. It's almost like a grid system so that we can know exactly where in space things are. So you can use your T-square, or if you have that gliding ruler, you can definitely use that as well. I'll just use the T-square for now. So I'm going to line it up with that intersection. And then just draw a line going all the way across the room. So now I know that this line is exactly 2 feet from that wall. Step 12 says to add the width of the fireplace to the floor plane by locating the points from the north and south walls on the ground line. In the PowerPoint it says 3 feet, but if you look back at your plan at the 3/16 inch scale, or even the one that you completed at the 1/4 inch scale, you'll see that it's actually 3.5 feet. So some of the dimensions on the PowerPoint aren't correct, and it might confuse you a little bit. But anytime it refers to a dimension of any sort, just make sure that you're going back to the plans that you've already created or the ones that I handed out to you to make sure that those are correct and you're not just making something according to the PowerPoint that isn't correct. Alright, so we want to measure the points of where this fireplace starts from both walls. So you would go ahead and measure from this wall to the start of the fireplace, which is 3.5 feet. Then you would measure from this wall to the fireplace, which is 3.5 feet. You could measure the distance across the fireplace, but since we already have those reference points, it's kind of pointless to do so. So take your scale and go ahead and mark out that 3.5 feet on each side. And this is similar to what you guys did in your elevation. Again, using that back wall, and we're just marking out the fireplace. So in the PowerPoint, it says to go ahead and refer to that vanishing point and connect to one of the corners of the fireplace that you just measured. And we're going to draw a line from that back wall to that 2 feet depth on both sides. So this geometry right in here, the one that we just created, would be the bottom of our fireplace. So that's kind of like the footprint of where the fireplace would sit in the room. Step 13 says to add height and depth to create the overall skeleton of the elements. Using a triangle and parallel rule, draw lines up from the corners of the fireplace on the floor plane. So, I'm going to use that triangle. Make sure it's parallel with the bottom of my floor, that ground level. Just draw a line up. Do it again on the other side. And then if you want to take a look at your elevation to see what height that is, we'll have to transfer that onto this drawing as well. It looks like that's right at 12 feet, same as our walls. So in class I said that you could put your elevation under your perspective, and you still can do that. It's probably not the best practice to use. If anything on your drawn elevation was off, then it would be off on your perspective as well. So it's always best to just take your measurements and drawings from the original. Alright, so that's the back of our fireplace. Now we need to add the depth to all of it. So we've already added the depth to this bottom part. And I'm going to take my parallel ruler. You could also do it with your T-square. I'll show you how to do that quick. So if you would take your T-square and just make sure it's not on the part that you're going to be drawing on. And then you would take a triangle and line it up with the point that you want to draw with. So if I wanted to create an extended line, I would just line it up with that bottom corner and draw it up. So that's how you would do it with the T-square and triangle, or you can take your parallel ruler. make sure it's lined up with one of them, and just slide it across to the place where you want it and then mark it. So I'll do that over here. When I'm doing final drafting, I prefer doing it with the T-square and triangle, just because I know that that is for sure squared up with my drawings underneath, if I chose to do that in the first place. If I don't have a T-square, then I'll use this, but sometimes you might pull one side a little too hard. Even though it does stay parallel very well, I'm always afraid that there's going to be a user error and I'm going to slip up somewhere. But it's totally up to you guys. This last step is going to draw a connecting line from this back overall shape of the fireplace outward to that 3D box of the fireplace. And so if you remember, you just always go back to your vanishing point and connect the corners and draw out. So I'll go to my vanishing point, put it up to that corner, and draw it out. And I'm only going to draw it until I hit the lines that I'm already using, so I don't have a bunch of extra. So again, line it up with that vanishing point, another corner, and draw it out. Now I just need to connect these two. And there we go. Alright, now we're going to add in the other built-in elements to the drawing. So we're on step 14. Translate the dimensions of the floor plan just as in the previous steps. Using your scale of measurement, locate the heights of the shelves and firebox in the picture plane. So go back to your elevation. And we're going to be measuring the individual heights of all of these shelves, the space in between it, and we're also going to measure out this right here. All of the shelves I'm using 3 inches. The gap on the bottom is about 1 foot, and then these two are about 1 foot 5 inches. So my overall height from the ground to the top of that top shelf is 4 foot 10. So we have to go and translate that back onto our perspective drawing. So I'm just going to start in the corners. So if I know my overall dimension is 4 foot 10, that's what I'm going to put down first, just so that I know I can stay within that.
Alright, so it looks like my measurements are a little bit off, and that might be because of my pen being so thick at this scale. So I'm just going to go back and fix those and make sure that they're all right before I start drafting. And that's why you use a pencil instead of pen when you draw things.
Alright, so I have the tick marks out for all of my shelving. Now I can start to put that into 3D. So basically the same method that you used for the fireplace. We're going to be going from the vanishing point and drawing lines out from each of those corners.
I'm going to use a wider line with actually. So you might not be able to see this very well on the video. But there's a good diagram on the PowerPoint as well. So you can do that.
So this is just me being nitpicky, but I think that anytime you're doing a technical drawing of some sort, it's good to be precise. So I noticed that my line weight up here is pretty good right here, or excuse me, not my line weight, the space in between is about where I want it to be. Right here it looks like it's getting a little bit too thick, and this might be a little bit too thin. So I'm just gonna go back, and since these are all kind of reference points for now, it won't be a huge deal if I change them up just a hair. Alright, so now they're looking a little bit more even. Right now I'm on the slide right after number 14 or step 14 on the PowerPoint. It doesn't have a specific step listed on there, but if you just want to look at those diagrams, they're really helpful in understanding where I'm getting all of these and where it's extending from, and maybe just a little bit more clear than this video might be. Alright, and since I already have those marked out, I'm just going to go ahead and see, we'll use a T-square for this one. I'm just going to go ahead and go over to the other side and mark those same points on the opposite wall rather than measuring them all out again. Alright, and like I said before, it's good to be precise, so I'm just going to go back and make sure that those measurements all line up.
So first I'll just do an overall measurement from that bottom corner to the top. Looks like I'm just a little bit off on all of them. It might have been because my paper moved. Alright.
Then we're just going to repeat that process on the other side. Alright, so the next step is to create kind of the side boundary and then also the front face of each of those shelves. So kind of like what we did with the fireplace. I'm going to line my parallel ruler up with that corner of the room and just slide it over to where the wall intersects with that 2-foot depth. And you could draw a guideline all the way up, but since I'm using pen, I'm just going to mark out on each shelf where that would be. And then same for the other side. Line it up with that wall and then move it over to the intersecting point. Alright, so on when you're looking at the shelves, since we're a little bit above them, we would see the top of the shelf. So if you think about looking in a room and looking across the table, you're not going to see the bottom of the table, you only see the top. And so it would be fine to draw everything out in guidelines and draw the complete box. And that's kind of what they did on the PowerPoint. And so you can see where they got all of their lines from. I'm going to go through, just draw lines from that corner point over to the center, but not go through the fireplace. I'll do that for the back first, and then we'll do it for the front face. Alright, so we have the back edge and this side edge completed for those shelves. Now we're going to go through and do that front face. So I'm just going to take the lines that we created at that depth mark on each of the shelves and draw it straight across. Similar process to what we did in the back. So just where that depth line and the side line intersect at that corner, draw it, but I'm not going to draw it through the fireplace.
So as you can see, lines are starting to overlap and get a little bit muddled.
So on each side we've created this box that represents the shelf. Since I'm using pen, it's kind of hard to see the difference between what the lines mean, but since you're using pencil, later on you're going to go back and start using pens to define what lines you actually see. So I'll do that with a thicker line weight here for you guys. Now we're going to move on to the firebox for the fireplace. First, I'm going to measure the distance from the side of the fireplace. So the side of the fireplace over to this side of that firebox, and I got about 1 foot 4 inches for both sides. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark on that back surface 1 foot 4 inches from both sides. After I have that done, we want to project it out onto that front face of the fireplace rather than just keeping it on the back. And so, same method that we used earlier, take it back to the vanishing point, connect it to that corner of the dot that you just created. I'm just going to place a dot on that front face, so that very bottom line on both sides. Alright, so now I know the width on that front face of the fireplace, of the firebox. Now I need to know how high it goes up, or where it actually starts on that fireplace. And I got about 2 feet. So I'm going to utilize the T-square and a triangle. Alright, I'm going to make one guideline going up from that point we measured out in the back, that 1 foot 4 inches from the side. Now on this line that I just drew, I'll measure up 2 feet. And then I also measured the height of that firebox, and I got 1 foot 9 inches. And so I'll go ahead and make that mark as well. Alright, and since I want to extend that out to the front face, I'm going to go back and use my vanishing point. And just mark that new line, or new mark on the outer face. Once I have those marks, I can go ahead and draw a line straight across. I know that this is the bottom of that firebox, and this is the top. And then we've already drawn reference points for the two sides of the firebox, but I'll just go ahead and darken those up so you can see them better. Alright, now we have our shelves and our fireplace. Alright, on to step 15. So we're supposed to measure the height of the window on the picture plane and draw a line through the measurement and the vanishing point. So first we actually need to find the height of the window and the dimensions and where it's actually located on the wall. And if you see on the PowerPoint, we're going to be starting with the windows over here. So if you take your section, that actually gives you the information that you need. So you'll want to measure the height from the ground up to that sill, and that's the bottom of the window. I found it to be 3 feet 6 inches. And then you'll also want to know how far in it is from the wall. So you can see the fireplace here, but this back dimension would be like the actual wall. So measuring from there to just that edge of the window is 5 feet. The overall height was 4 foot 6, and then the overall length of it was 10 foot 2 inches. So we can take that and now transfer it to the perspective. So first we have to mark out the height of the window, so where it actually starts and then where it ends. So from the floor to the base was 3 foot 6 inches. So we just go ahead and mark that. From that bottom corner of the wall on the picture plane. And then after you have that marked, you'll take the vanishing point and the height of the window. And just draw a line straight through, extending beyond. And you're going to do the same thing for where that ends, or the height of the window. So I got 4 feet 6 inches, and I'll just go up from that point that I just got. Again, take it back to the vanishing point and draw a line. Next part of that step is to mark a point on the ground line, so the one that we had down here, that represents the distance of the window edge on the south wall. So how far away it is from this wall to that first edge of the window. And I got 5 feet for that. So we're going to use the same method that we used to find that 2 feet away from the wall. And we know we want 5 feet this time, so going to this corner over there, I'm just going to measure out 5 feet along that ground line. Alright, I'm going to take that point back to the vanishing point. And just draw a line out. And then we also have to use our diagonal point, which was over here along that horizon line. And go through the corner of the wall. And draw a diagonal line that intersects this line. So now we have that 5-foot point, and I'm gonna take, actually I'll take this, my T-square, and just draw a line across. So now I know that anything that lines up with this line on the floor is 5 feet away from my back wall. Now you could also do this with a triangle in your T-square. I'm just going to take the sliding ruler and line it up with my wall edge, and then move it over to that point that we just marked out that's 5 feet along that wall. Just draw a line up. Now we're going to follow those same steps as it says in step 16 to create the window frame. And it says to use 2 inches for the frame of the window. So that's going to be, let's look at our section again. So that'll be all around the window, and then we're also going to create these lines. These are called mullions, and they're just like separating points in a window. So we'll also want to draw those in. Alright, so since we already know where that 5-foot mark is, rather than measuring out 5 feet 2 inches, we'll just measure 2 inches along that ground line. And draw a new line out. See where it intersects with the diagonal line, which I already have drawn. I'll just draw a line across. These lines are really close together, but there definitely is a depth to them, so make sure that you have it there. So like I was saying before, you could just do this with your triangle. Alright, so there's one edge. Then we can also measure 2 inches down from this height and 2 inches up from this height.
To get our top and bottom frame.
Then taking it back to that vanishing point. Alright, so there we have the main part of our frame, and then we need to add the mullions. Alright, so we want to measure our mullions. This looks like it's about 2 foot 5 inches. Is that 4 foot, about 8 inches? Double check. And again, 2.5. The first measurement that we want to find is the width of that window. So we already have that 5 feet measured out, which is right here. We have the other 2 inches, which comes here. So if we want to measure another 2 feet 5 inches this way, we're going to go along that ground line. And from the last point, measure out 2 feet 5 inches. And then just repeat the process that we've been doing. Go back to your vanishing point. Put this straight edge through the point that you just marked and extend the line. Go back to your diagonal point, put it through the corner of the room, just over here. I'm just going to draw it all the way so I don't have to keep drawing it. I'm going to go ahead and mark that 2 inches out right now as well.
Extend the line for the 2 inch mullion in between.
Alright, now going from the intersections that we found over to the wall for both of those points. Now I'm going to find that second mullion that should be over here. And go for my last point and measure out 4 feet 8 inches. Because that was the length of the middle window. And then another 2 on that for the mullion. If you didn't extend that diagonal line from the diagonal point far enough, you'll have to go and remeasure that, but I extended it far enough so that I had both of those already intersecting. So you're going to continue that same process to do the other wall over here. And as you notice on your floor plan and then also in the PowerPoint, there's going to be a door on this wall along with windows, and the windows go all the way down to the floor, and so you won't have to measure up that 3 foot 6 inches for these windows. So just follow the guide that you see both on your plan, your elevations and sections, and also the PowerPoint. Those will all give you different types of information. But I'll have you go ahead and do that on your own. If you guys have any questions, just refer back to how we did this side over here. And we're going to move on to creating depth in the windows. So the slide after step 17 gives you guidance on how to do this. So the first part says to draw horizontal lines from the intersections left from when you located the window and the trim on the floor of the wall plane to the new extended depth of the wall. Alright, so we know that this wall over on this side, so if you're looking at the room, this wall over on this side, we already calculated that out to be about 1 foot. And so we're going to go down to that ground line and measure 1 foot. We're going to go to the outside of this corner. Once again, going back to that vanishing point, just drawing our guideline. All right, so when you're looking at this frame, you're going to be seeing the interior of it. So just to give you an example, if I were to make this more 3D, and I know that this is rough, but just to give you an idea of what you're looking at. So we want to make it 3D rather than just a window or lines placed on a wall. So we're going to be measuring from the inside of the trim and where that line that we just created that shows the depth of the wall, where those two meet. So the interior line of that trim and the line that shows the depth of the wall, I'm just going to extend those so they intersect. And then at that point, where they intersect, I'll draw a line up. And then I'll connect the corners to that inner line. So those would just be parallel to your floor. And to finish it off, you'll go back to your vanishing point. Connect the corner. You can do these one at a time. Alright, same with the next one. I'll go to the inner mark of the frame, extend it. To where we found the depth of the wall. And then draw a line up from that intersection. Alright, there we go. So now we have the depth of those windows as well. I'm just going to go back and darken these up a little bit. So on step 18, it tells you to add the wood slats onto the front of the fireplace. So if you remember in class, I said that adding this detail wasn't going to be necessary. You definitely can add those wood slats in. Just know that whatever you do on your elevation, you're going to have to draft out onto your perspective. So if you do stone, that might be pretty tricky on getting it exactly where it's supposed to be. So doing something like a tile or a wood detail is going to be a lot easier, but just make sure that your elevation of that wall and your perspective of that wall match in the end. The PowerPoint also tells you to add the baseboards and any other details that you see in there. So again, they added windows up here, they added the windows and doors to this side, they added the wood slats, and then they also added the baseboards. You guys can do that on your own. We're going to skip ahead to step 19 and finish up the furniture. Finally, add the furniture into the space. First, locate the furniture on the floor plan. So we'll do that first. And I've already dimensioned it out. So what we're looking for is how far away from this wall the furniture is and how far away from this wall the furniture is. And so you can see in the floor plan, I have my cone of vision partially there. And if we were to include everything in this living room space, we would include the chair, the table, and the couch. If you were to include the couch, then you wouldn't be able to see the table. But we'll just start with the chair for now. So from this wall to this edge of the chair, I measured it out to be about 3 feet 10 inches. from this wall over to the edge of the chair, it's about 1 foot 2 inches. And then we also want to know the dimensions of the chair. So the side of the chair, or the depth of it, is 3 feet, and then the front of the chair, or the width, is going to be 3 foot 6 inches. So we're going to use those dimensions now. Alright, so first I'm going to mark this corner on the floor in my perspective. So I need to measure 1.5 feet out and then 3 feet 10 inches of depth. So starting from this corner, I said it was 1 foot 2 inches. So I'm going to put that on my ground line. And I'm also going to go ahead and put that 3 foot 10 inches down on my ground line. And I'll draw 2 lines going back to the vanishing point. Just on the floor. So we have this one and this one that we're looking at. So this is how far away it is from this wall. With this line, we're going to have to use the diagonal point to create that diagonal line, and that's how far it will be from this wall. And I already have most of that diagonal line already drawn from before. And so where that intersects, those 2 lines intersect, I'm going to draw a line over and use my parallel ruler. Just draw that over. Alright, so right now I know that this spot is the same as this spot on the floor plan. My next step, I'm going to mark the line for this end point. So we already have this dimension, the 1 foot 2 inches, which would be right here. So I just need to add that 3 foot 6 inches onto the back. So use the same method. Go back to your vanishing point. Just measure 3 foot 6 inches. Alright, so I already have my diagonal line there. The line that I just drew, I'm going to line it up and draw a line over. And it's this top one. Alright, so I now, between these 2 marks, have the back of my chair. Now I need to find the depth of my chair, which on the plan is from here to here, or 3 feet. And we'll just have to mark that on our ground level and measure out like we did for this one over here. So in total, this front of the chair would be 4 foot 2 inches. I'm adding the depth of this and then the depth of the chair. So 4 foot 2 inches. And I'm just going to take that straight from that corner point. So I'm just going to extend the depth line that we established before of how far back those chairs are. That one's already extended. So this line right here is the front end of my chair. This is the back. This is one side. And I'll mark the other side a little darker. Alright, and that's the other side. Now you'll notice on your plan that there's also like a backing and arms to this chair. So we'll go ahead and add those now. But first we need to find the dimensions of those. Alright, it looks like both of these arms are 6 inches. And the back is about 8 inches. It looks like there's a cushion on there, which is about 4. Alright, so first I'm going to draw the back of the chair and then that back cushion. So I have my point of where that back of the chair is, so I'm just going to measure out 4 inches from there for the back, and then another 4 inches, totaling 8 for the cushion. Line it up with the vanishing point, and draw it on. Next, I'm going to mark out where these arms are. So we'll start with this one. It's going to be 6 inches from this side, which was 3'10". So I know that the mark I used was right here, but I'll just double check. So that's 3'10". So from that mark, I'm going to measure out 6 inches. And since that's like a depth in the space or coming this way, we'll have to use that diagonal line again. Alright, and I already have it drawn. So I'll take my parallel here. And draw a line from that intersection over to where it meets the back. Then I'm going to do the same for the other, which is also 6 inches. And if you're ever confused on how I'm getting these dimensions, it's honestly just going from how far away it is from this back wall. So you could go in and individually measure each one and then remeasure each one on here. But since I already know which points are a certain depth or a certain distance away, I'm just using those. So like I knew where my point for this line was, so I just measured 6 inches back. Now we're starting to see the form of the chair. The next step is going to be adding height. So if you want to go to the next slide, at the top it says, add the height to the furniture. At this angle, in our perspective, you will not be able to see the seat of the chair, so there is no reason to add it to the drawing. However, in our drawing, we are able to see the front of the chair, and so we will have to add it to our drawing. Alright, and so we're just going to go from the back end of the chair and measure the height up, and then we'll go from the front end of the chair and measure the height up, and then we should have all of the guidelines that we need to start forming the chair. As you see on your PowerPoint, it says that the chair is 2 foot 6 inches, I believe. Yep, 2 foot 6. So I'm going to use this point since that was used to measure the back of the chair or to mark it. Just go up. Just want to make sure that I'm getting it parallel. Two foot 6 inches. From that point. And we'll also need to go up 2 foot 6 inches from the other sides of this point. Now that we have the top laid out, we can start connecting the dots. So I know that I need to draw a line from this corner of the chair, the bottom corner, that we'll see up to the height of the chair. And I know I need to draw on the front as well, right here. And I'll need to draw on this corner up. And right now I'm going to hold off drawing that corner.
Because I know it's not going to go all the way through. So first,
I'm just going to form this box. So that's where our chair is going to sit, within this box. And I know I'm going to see these lines, so I'm just going to darken them up.
so it's a little easier to read.
So the one height that we are missing is the height of this front seat right here. If you look through your plans, elevations, and sections, you see that we don't know the actual height of the seat of this chair. And since it's not given to you, I just looked it up online, and a typical height for the seat of a chair is going to be anywhere between 15 to like 20, 23 inches. If you do a little bit more research, you realize that a lounge chair is going to be closer to that like 16 to 19 range. So for this purpose, you can just go ahead and use 1.5 feet or 18 inches. For the seat of this chair. So I'm just going to go back to the dot that I used to mark out the front side of this chair. And I'm going to measure straight up from that 1.5 feet or 18 inches. Now that we know the seat height, we can go ahead and add our arms as well.
So rather than drawing the arms all the way up, and this is a design choice as well, I'm just going to start at the seat and go up to the correct height. Yep, just kind of bend down.
And this line drawing is starting to get really confusing with all of the lines. So make sure that you're erasing lines that you don't need. I'm forming the back and the back cushion of the chair. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that always goes back to the vanishing point. Just draw that back and the cushion in. So this chair looks kind of ugly since it is so boxy. But as long as you guys have this dimensioned right, I'm not going to be too worried about how pretty your furniture is. Yes, it needs to be clean and clear. You're also going to be adding materials to it. If you wanted to add legs onto the bottom of the chair, as long as it started at the right point, I'd be fine with that. If you were going to get really technical and actually add a real chair in there to make it look more realistic and draft something out, that would take a long time just because of all of the curves. So we'll just leave it as a boxy chair for now. So hopefully this helped you guys. You guys can finish the rest. Just remember to keep being precise with all of these drawings so that in the end they're accurate, and a good way to show clients or a good way to represent your ideas through drawings.